All right, so this is Sarah. So our assignment is going to be we're going to draw one of these angry birds, and then in Illustrator, and then we're just going to make them bounce, okay? And then I want to add at least one extra thing in there that you do to make the angry bird look a little bit more alive, something like blinking or changing his expression or something like that. So here is an example of Sarah's. Obviously, she went a little bit further than just the assignment required. It'll be up there in a second. I'm still thinking. All right. So that was Sarah's, and here's Jonathan's. So again, other areas you can kind of customize it and tweak it. Now we only have to do one, but obviously in each one of these they did extra ones. Once you see the process of how we're going to go into Illustrator and draw these things, it doesn't become very daunting to do that task because the process is relatively quick. Okay. For some of you, using Illustrator might be, you know, a foreign country, but you just have to get into there and start playing with it. Hey. All right, so I'm going to go into Illustrator, and I'm going to create a piece of art. So our end project is going to be 1920 by 1080. That's what we're going to have. But because of the other stuff that we want to create inside here, we actually want to create a bigger landscape inside of it. Okay, so our document here is going to be just at 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. Okay, 1920 1080. I'm also going to turn off the horrible transparency grid. I don't care for that. Make sure it's RGB, and then we should be good there. Okay, so even though this is, once it loads, there it is. Even though my document is constrained essentially to this size, I'm actually going to make it bigger because I want to be able to pan the background basically like it's 3D. Okay, so if I had it just in that area, I couldn't really do that because it would be very limiting to that area, to that space. I'm also going to create two different documents just so I can keep them separated, but I'm going to create one that's going to be the angry bird and one that's going to be the background. That way I have two different areas that I could focus on. If I'm focusing on the bird or the background, I'm good to go. So I'm going to use that Spartan illustration, that wonderful thing I drew last time. Still is here, so I'm going to use that. You start off with basic shapes, right? So don't go anything crazier than just basic shapes with this. Keeping in mind that your character is going to be hitting the ground, okay? So we don't want to have anything like dipping below here because then that might be weird to have that hit the ground, right? If he has a cape and that cape like hits the ground and bounces, that doesn't make sense. If he hits the ground and the cape's like behind the ground, that doesn't make sense. So you always have just extra stuff to worry about if you do that. So try to keep everything kind of like above the ground of this. So I just made a circle, and I made sure it was perfectly circular, not an oval like this. I held down Shift to constrain it. I also held down Alt to draw it out from the center. And then there's my circle. So some stuff that you want to also keep in mind is not to create everything super uniform. Like if you take Figure 2 class, they spend a lot of time just working on what your lines look like. Right? So it's not just like you drew a line, but you actually have like tapered lines and they're in specific spots to make this feel a little bit more realistic. So instead of using just the uniform line up here, I like to use one of these, which turns out pretty cool looking. Obviously I gotta make my stroke a bit bigger. So you can see how we get this nice little line shape in there. Now if you want to customize what your line looks like, there's actually a stroke width tool that allows you to stretch out the stroke in certain spots, and it's pretty awesome. It's right there, width tool. And so all you do is just go to this and you just click and drag, and you can stretch it out or shrink it down. And what it does is it creates a custom path for you right up here, so you can use that for other stuff too. I'm just going to give this maybe a little bit more thickness there. Cool. Okay. So now I've given more thickness to the bottom, more thickness to the top, and then less thickness to the front. That's where most of our detail is going to be. So for my little Spartan dude, he has a helmet on too. So I'll draw the helmet on after. I want to draw the eyes too. So I'm just going to create a couple circles for the eyes. Okay, so something like that maybe. I can go into my, make those just a bit thicker. There we go. And I'll make that a bit bigger too so we can see it better. So I can go into the reshaping of this, but I just have to be careful because if I decided I wanted him to look like left or right, or I wanted his eyes to turn, it might look weird if I just grab this and do that. Oops. If I grab the whole thing like that and do that to it, that could look weird in how it's rotating, so I may want to just keep that in mind as I'm doing it. So I'm just going to kind of shape his eyes a little bit. Because he's a Spartan, he's going to have kind of angry eyes anyway. Oops. Keep that there. Pull this out. Alright, so that looks alright. So now I'm going to take this and put a little pupil in there. I'm not going to start creating the other eye yet until I create one. Once I get one set up and I know what it's supposed to look like, then I can get the other one set up. I don't want to fill on this, or white fill, so I'm going to switch this to black and then take the fill color off. Okay, maybe his eye should be a little bit tinier. Alright, that's good. And this looks a little clumpy, so I'm just going to kind of tweak this a bit. Let's pull, not that, pull this down some. There we go. And now he looks too angry. I think I want him to have a little more determined look. There we go. So now it's more determined than angry. So now I'm going to give him some bushier eyebrows. So I'll go in with my line segment tool. I can just draw a line here and just crank this up. And then again, I can go in with my width tool and start to compress some of these areas. So maybe it's really thin right here and then really thick right there. Or maybe it's vice versa. The width tool. It's just on the left side here, right under the rotation one is the width tool. So you use Shift W also. Yeah, it's pretty sweet because you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. Just not liking the shape of the eye. Yep. Yep, same thing. So that looks good. I think I just want to add a little bit more width here. I think I don't want it to come directly to a point. I wanted to have it a little bit of thickness like that. There we go. Okay. And then a little bit of overlap. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, the cool thing is that a lot of the stuff you can tweak after the fact too, so that's not even a big deal. And I'm just going to, just to try it out, I'm just going to add a point in the middle of this. And then just scoot it up some. Come on. There we go. I think I actually like it rigid like that. Move. Maybe not. Like that. Alright, we'll keep it like that. Okay. So now that I have this eye here, I'm going to put a little line under the eye also. I think that will help. So I just go like this and like that. Okay, so there he has a little line, and then I can give that some thickness. Push this down a little bit more. Alright, so that looks alright. Alright, I can tweak it further if I need to. So now I'm going to copy all this, Control C. I'm going to paste it, Control V. Obviously I could just duplicate it too. And then I'm going to use my reflect tool, which is over here under rotation. Reflect tool. And you click and drag and hold shift, and then it reflects it onto the other side. Now this is going to look weird if I just put him here. He's going to look cross-eyed. That looks weird. Also, I don't know why that one came in so short. That's weird. So what I'm going to do is... Why did that shrink? That shrunk a considerable amount. There we go. I'm going to grab this, go back to the reflect tool, flip it over, and I need to move this eye over, but I also need to reshape this eye so that it feels a little bit more like we're seeing it kind of wrapped around the side of him. So if I grab that and hold down the, go to T, nope, not T, wrong program, Control T. too many programs. I just click on the button. There we go. Cool. So now that looks a little bit more like it's in perspective. Then I can start to rotate some of these and adjust some of these. And move this. And drop it in there. Okay. Now the fact that it's not right on top of there doesn't even matter because it's a cartoon, so their stuff can actually float a bit. So now it's just a matter of placing it and getting things lined up. I think I still want to squish this eye just a bit more. Come on. This, that. There we go. All right, so it's good enough for now. We can tweak it later. I just want it a little bit more rounded after. All right, so now I have to go and do his beak. So I'm going to do very similar. Grab the pen tool. You notice how I use the pen tool for a lot of these kinds of things. So I'm going to draw in the whole beak, and for a Spartan, I think his beak would be kind of shorter. Control-click that. I'm going to go down here and kind of round that off. Oops. There you go. Something like that looks good. So now I can just close this off and maybe give us a little rounding on this side. All right, and then we can start to add some thickness to it. And then add some weighting. And again, you can try the default ones just to see what those are looking like. You may find that you like one of those, but in some cases you're going to need to just go to that width tool to give it some variation. And you can see just the variation I have here already is really adding to the image. I think even on this, I'm going to add a little bit of thickness here and some thickness, too much thickness there. There. And same thing here, I'm going to add some thickness at this point and then maybe shrink this thickness down some. Oops. I'm going to do it right on that point so that it shrinks inward like that. There we go. Come on. All right, so that's all right. What else do we have on here? We have a little shield, so I'll add a shield. And this one I can probably use one of these just because it's a shield. That one was good. Cool. And then I'll add a little button here on the shield. If you haven't used these guides inside of Illustrator, they're like amazing because they just help line everything up. Boom. That was centered and should be centered inside there. Nope. Now it's centered. Okay. And then we'll use the same thing here. I'll go to that. I'll make this bigger. Okay. Obviously, he's going to need some color if we're going to be using this. So I'm going to start adding some color into this mix. I'm going to go with like a green that is really desaturated. So I need my color mixer. That's my themes. I don't want that. Where's my color mixer? I just had it. Color. Yes. Oh, I have to choose. Show options. There we go. So I like to use HSB. There we go. So that way I can just desaturate this, and I get this really cool like green color. Now I don't need to color the tip of this. I can give this basically the same color as that one, but maybe just brighten it some. And now it'll just appear to be kind of like that center area. He also has like a little spear on the side, so I can go with a stroke. And then give this some thickness. And then even put an arrow on the end of it. So if I go to my stroke window, and I show the options, which you have to do for everything apparently, I can choose an arrowhead. That one should be okay. It's a little more deadly. Good. Cool. And then the same thing, I can go through and adjust my line weight. That's weird. That one. Nope. Nope. I think I'm just going to stick with the regular line weight. Just a regular uniform for that one. Okay. So I'm going to leave that off to the side for now. I'm going to leave this off to the side for now. I want to add a little bit more detail to my bird, especially his helmet and some like shadowy stuff. His beak obviously needs some work, so let me put a fill color on this. I'm going to grab that bird, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to grab one of these colors here. Okay, making sure that the colors are going to work together. So the green on the shield and that. The colors on my laptop do not reflect the ones that are on the projector. They're a bit more vibrant up there. Okay, so that's cool. His eyes are cool like that. All right, that should work. Now I want to put in a little line for the beak. So let's say I went in here. And let's try it right there first. Just see what it looks like. Okay, obviously way too thick. Holy cow. Let's get rid of the fill. Let's just keep that and do this. It looks more like a duck's bill. Let's put that up here. Nope. I think this extra line here is just throwing me. Let's just remove that extra line. There we go. Alright, so now he's determined. Cool. I'm going to add some other stuff too. So like one thing I want to add is his helmet. So let me go to my pen tool and I'll draw in his helmet. So remember, here's the bottom line of this. So I don't want his helmet to start down here. I want to basically start right about there. That way his two areas are about the same. So it's going to come in like this. It's going to drip down like that. It's going to come up here. It's going to go down not too much there. Drip down about here. And then we're going to come back up. And I will, of course, tweak that so it doesn't look so weird. All right, and then I will go in with my arrow tool, eyedropper. Grab that color. I think I'm going to go with something a little bit, obviously not so bright. That looks really weird like that. It looks like hair right now. Where's my color again? This. Maybe darker. Yeah, darker looks better. Maybe just eyedrop this color. There we go. And then just to test things together, we'll put this right there. Alright, he looks like a Spartan. Alright, cool. I am going to taper this a little bit or soften this. This is a little bit too harsh. Okay, cool. And then I will also do it to this one. Alright. Good. Now I could add some texture to this also, just so like maybe lines, but again, I gotta be kind of careful so it doesn't look like hair, which is kind of on the verge of looking like hair. Hopefully the armor and the spear will make people realize it's not hair. So I want to add inside here, right here, I want to add a little highlight. If you look at any Angry Birds, they have these really cool highlights that go along that bottom piece. bird angry. And it's a good way to kind of break up just having a flat color. It really makes it pop and feel a little bit more of a 3D piece as opposed to something looking completely flat like this, right? So just having that little loop here and some other stuff, like I said, really adds to it. So I'm going to go in with my circle here, and I'm just going to draw a circle underneath this. And I'm going to get rid of my stroke, so just turn that off. And however big I set this, this is how big that circle is going to be. Alright, so something like that. Alright, so now this is going to be a little bit complex, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this over here. So what I need to do is these two shapes, I actually want to separate into different pieces, okay? So I need, just so you can see this beforehand, if I do this the way it is now, what's going to happen is it's going to create a stroke that's going to go here and then over this. I don't want that. So I actually have to make three pieces. One's going to be the stroke, one's going to be this color, and one is going to be that color, okay? So you'll see in a second if that doesn't make complete sense. I'm just going to copy this piece so it's off to the side. Then I'm going to take these two pieces and under the live paint, which is, that's not it, shape builder, sorry, under the shape builder, I'm just going to click on these pieces, and this is how simple this is. Let me take the stroke off first. No stroke on you. There we go. So I'm going to click on this piece, click on this piece, and click on this piece. So that's all Shape Builder does, is you can click on any areas that are overlapping, and it makes a brand new piece for it. Okay? So what I can do is then go to my selection tool and click on this bottom piece and just delete it, and now I have two pieces that are basically independent of each other. So now I can go back to this. Maybe I'll use this color now. And make sure I select the right color. There we go. Take the stroke off. Cool. So now you see how I have this as the top and then this as the bottom. That's not really a good bottom color. Let me go back to this, and then let me just desaturate that and brighten it up a little bit. There we go. It's better. And then I need the stroke. So if I did this one and I put the stroke on it, you'll see that the stroke goes around this part, so that's going to look funny. So that's why we don't use that stroke, we use this one. So I take the fill off of it, pull this back on top of it, and now it looks like I have that. I just have to take this piece and push it below it. Cool. So I just grabbed it, and using my hotkeys, I was able to arrange and then send it to the back. So now I have this, which is a really cool way to kind of show off the body compared to just this flat version. And I can delete those two, and then now just use this one in its place. And again, just make sure it's like set to the very, very back.
What's the key?
Control Shift left bracket. Cool. So that looks pretty good. So now we have this. Maybe we give him, because he was obviously a Spartan, he's got some war wounds on him. So like right there, that's supposed to be a war wound. Let's go with 4. Let's go with our pen tool. I'm just going to add a couple points in here and then just kind of move these a little bit. There we go. And then we can, of course, give this a color of, we'll start off with this red and maybe just darken it some. There we go. Alright, so now our Angry Bird is ready for war. I'm going to find a good spot for this. Let's say right there. Okay. So now, if we were to take him into Illustrator as he is right now, what would or into After Effects right now, he would basically be one big object. So we can't edit any single thing inside this one big object. We have no editing abilities. All we can do is treat him as a graphic, and we can squish and stretch him and do whatever. So what we want to do is start separating the stuff into pieces that might be animated together or might be animated separately or differently. So stuff like his spear, there's no way I'd want this to like squash and stretch, but his body I may want to squash and stretch. I may want his eyes, his pupils to move around. I may not want his spear to move around. So rambunctious. I'll have to open that back up for Kevin. So I need to start separating stuff. So we go to our layers here, and we start separating things. So inside of layer 1, everything is basically locked into that. Even though it looks like they're on separate layers, they're not. They're just in separate groups inside that layer. So I'm going to grab the shield and the shield. I'm going to make a brand new layer, and I'm going to drop them using this onto that new layer. And I will rename this shield, or shelf, however you want to spell it. There we go, shield, so that we have it, and then I can turn that off. I'll grab the arrow, I'll make a new layer, I'll drag this onto that, I will call this arrow. I will hide that layer. I'll take his helmet, I'll put it onto a new layer, call that helmet, turn that off. He's bald. I'll grab his body, make sure I grab his little wound. I'll make a new layer, I'll drag this into the new layer, call that body, like that. For his beak, let's say we wanted to animate his beak. So like you saw maybe on the Pirates one, the beak actually opens and closes some, right? So let's say that I wanted a version of the beak that would actually open and close. What I can do is create 2 separate pieces of the beak, and that will allow me to open and close the beak. So if I take this, and I'm just going to stretch this out so it fills this entire area, right, from start to end, here, there, good. If I do the same little trick that I did on the other pieces on the body, I should be able to create 2 separate pieces here. So I would have basically a top of the bill and a bottom of the bill that I could then open and close, right? So I'm going to take this and copy it, so we just have that off there for the stroke. I may need to do something different, but we'll leave it like that. I'm going to go to the, make sure I grab both of these. If I go to the shape builder and I start to click on these, you'll see instantly it does that. Now it's acting funky because that stroke is now trying to update. Okay, that's why it flipped around. So that's why I can't have a stroke right on there like that. But now I do have 2 separate shapes. There's the top and there's the bottom. So then I could go through and add a stroke just to the individual pieces of this. So I could go here to stroke, like that. And then I could go to my stroke width tool. And maybe like right there, I shrink the width of this. And then maybe right here, I shrink the width of that. Okay, and then the same thing for the bottom. I'll add a stroke to it. Say 2. And then I'll go up to about this, and I will shrink, that's the wrong one. I will shrink the width of that. Now when we get these little points, it just means I need to go to the stroke area and just change the corners. So once I start changing the corners, one of these should, oh, apparently not, it does not want to. Oh, I didn't grab the right one. There we go. There we go, that's better, the bevel joint one. Okay, so now I can just again kind of tweak this to get that beak to look the way that I want the beak to look. All right, so I don't need this anymore. Just drop this back in here. I need to turn my layers on so I can see where he's supposed to be. About that looks good. Okay, so I have to put that back up there. All right, so now I have the beak. And then in order to animate the beak separately, I need to have 2 different layers. I need to have beak top and beak bottom, okay? So let me turn the body off. I'm going to grab the beak top, make a new layer, beak underscore top. Hide that. Grab the bottom of the beak, new layer, drop this on here, beak underscore bottom. Okay, that's good. And then the same thing for the eyes. So if I wanted to animate the eyebrows separately, I need to create separate layers for each eyebrow, which I do. So I grab this eyebrow, I'd make a new layer, I would drop this on here, and then I would say eyebrow. And then it's important to identify which side, right? So left and right. And then also think about whether it's his left and right or your left and right, right? So I always do their left and right because that makes more sense to me. So that would be his right eyebrow. So I would just say eyebrow right, right. And then I would turn that off. And then I would click on this one, and then I would make a new layer. And you see the process for this is pretty much the same. Eyebrow underscore left. Turn that off. And then this, I'm going to do the same thing. eye socket underscore left or right. And try to be consistent with your naming. If you're consistent with the naming, it just makes everything so much easier. So I'm doing like the same capitals in the same spots. It's just a matter of whether it's right or left that makes the difference. Pupil right. Pupil left. And then eye line right. There we go. And then layer 1 is nothing, so I can just delete that. Okay. So now he's obviously in the wrong order because of how I layered everything. So then I just need to go through and say, okay, well, here's all the eye stuff. This should be above the body, obviously. Here's all the, oh, it looks crazy. Here's the pupils. Those need to be above this. It's not in it, above it, I said. That. Same thing here. This needs to be above that. Cool. These eye lines need to be above the eye sockets. Body is good there. Beak obviously needs to be above the body. And the same thing with that. Cool. Okay. So now he is pretty much done and ready to go into After Effects. So then I will save him, which I have not done at all. And then I will go to my desktop, into my P drive, into 2200, new folder, Angry Bird, new folder, artwork, and Angry Spartan. And then 0, 1, just in case I have any iterations I add on later. Okay. His spear shouldn't be so high up. His spear should actually be behind the body. There we go. All right, so I'm going to save that and we're good. So now, just so you can see it, if I were to go into After Effects and double click and go and find that piece of footage, okay, I'm going to bring this in as composition retain layer size. That way it shrinks everything down to what the layer is exactly. So I import. And again, it's a good idea to do this before you go too far. I'm going to double click this composition, and then I have all the layers right here. Okay, my bow is there, I just can't see it, or my spear. So if I go to my comp settings and I just give this a different color background like that, now I can see his arrow is standing right there, his spear. Now here's what's cool about this is that if I go to my pupils, whoops. Because everything is on a separate layer, if I needed to, I could grab like his eyebrows and I could animate them kind of coming down like that. I could animate his pupils moving around too. So if he's looking one way or the other way, I can very quickly be able to do this just using some keyframes, just like we've been doing this entire time. If I wanted his beak to open, I can grab the beak, make sure I grab the bottom one. And for this one, I would rotate. Now I can't rotate it right from here, that doesn't make sense. So I would hit the pivot, I would move this to where I want this to rotate from, and then I would go to rotate, and then I can rotate this to have his beak open and close. And then of course I could put something behind there, so if I wanted teeth or whatever, I would just have something else back there, okay? Cool. So that's how we would draw out the Spartan guy. So now I'm gonna, I saved this already, I'm gonna make a new document. And 1920 by 1080, yep. And I'm going to draw out the background. And the way that I like to draw this out is obviously we zoom out so we can see the whole thing. And I like to just do placeholders first, just so I get an idea of what my story is going to be. So the Angry Bird, like I said, is going to be jumping from 3 times. That's all he has to do, okay? So I want to make sure that this landscape makes sense. So in my drawing, I have basically, here's the ground area. Let me flip this around so I can see it. Maybe give this a little bit lighter color. There we go. And he has a couple little ditch areas inside here too. So if I went to my tool and I just kind of drew these out as to there's going to be a couple openings here. bit closer together. Okay, so he'll be here, he'll jump, maybe bounce here, and then jump over there. There he goes, boing, boing, boing. Okay, so nice little bouncing action. And then I'm gonna just subtract these just like I did before. So I can use a shape builder. Oops, not the gradient mesh, that's the wrong tool to use. There we go, and then I can just delete, delete, delete. Okay, very quickly. Okay, nothing I had to even draw out. Just deleting stuff with that shape builder is like a fantastic tool to be able to use. Then what do I have? I have a cave on the right side. So I can use the basic shapes. I can use the pen tool. I can use the drawing tools, whatever. So I'm just going to draw out here some sort of rocky type cave. And I'm going to close that. There we go. So that should be good there. What else do I have in here? I have some Spartans. So I'm going to go to here. Silhouette. So I want to create something like this. Something like that guy right there. So I'm just going to copy that, bring that into Illustrator, and use it as a reference, not a copy, but use it as a reference for what I want my image to look like. So I'm going to save this onto my desktop, onto here, and Angry Bird, reference, Spartan. Okay, so now I can go into this and place Okay, so I want this to be pretty much just really flat looking. So let's say there's the knee. And you can see how I'm not copying this. It's more of me just kind of like outlining a rough form of what it is. Okay, so something like that, and then I'm going to put the helmet on here. So everyone's is going to be different, obviously. No one's doing the same one as me. So all of yours are going to have their own kind of design, complications, whatever that's going to come along with it. That just needs to be rotated slightly so that it looks like it's going straight up like that. Good. And then a circle. Good. Okay, so that's all I want, so I can delete that now. Okay, because I thought it would just be cool, just kind of like in the background here. And this is one of those times where the shape builder is really nice because you can go to, oops, not the shape builder. For this one, I want to go to combine. So I'm going to go to shape, transform, path finder. There it is. And I'm just going to say combine. There you go. So now all those are just like one shape. So it's really cool because now it's all one shape. And then I don't have to worry about all those different paths and people and whatever else. So I'm going to put these guys like right here. And this is, if you've ever seen the movie 300, it's like them kind of watching the baby or the kid go off into the army or go off into his training. So we'll do something like that. That's cool. And then I'll give them a little bit of coloration too. So maybe like that. So that's where he starts. Does a little bounce, bounces over here. Bounces again, bounces over that, and then comes there. So I can of course make this a bit more complex, but that's going to be the gist of what that is. I'll add in some sky and background stuff too, just so we can see that also. The best thing is that you don't have to be locked into trying to get anything laid down precisely. So like if I don't like the shape of this cloud, I can always come back and redraw this cloud, make sure it's on the same layer. When After Effects imports it, boom, it's in the same exact spot, but now it looks updated, right? So I'm just going to add some clouds in here, like that. That's cool. And then I'll add some, this is where you can really start to use some of this reference, is using these silhouettes is really nice, just to add some extra detail. Oops, no, not Roman, or Greek. Right? Greek silhouette. That's what I wanted. There we go. So I don't think I even need to bring that in. And some columns. Okay, so I'll just do that again. And you'll see how I draw stuff kind of off to the side and then bring it in there. It just makes it a lot easier than trying to put everything in the same spot. And here I can go to the pen tool and maybe just drop in some points. And then grab this and then flare that out. Oops, I said flare that out. Come on, grab these. Transform. Oh, I'm grabbing the wrong ones. There we go. Cool. All right. And I can do the same thing up here. Just click a point, grab these, hit E, scale it out. All right, that's good. So then I'll do the same kind of thing I just did. And then I believe under transform, there's a step, like transform again. Yep. Really handy tool. And then I'll put some rocks on top of this. Maybe they'll be rounded a little bit. And even though they don't really have spaces in the picture, I'm adding spaces in there because I want there to be a little bit easier to see that there is stuff on top of it. Maybe I'll shrink this one here. Like that, and then just duplicate it and have two there. There we go. And then I'll just add just some stuff here. Alright, so that looks good. So I'm going to take all this stuff and I'm going to group all that stuff together, or I can use my Pathfinder and combine everything. That works too. That's good. And then this will just be like way in the background. So I just shrink it down. It's like way back there. And the color's going to be a bit dimmer because it's further back. And then I'll put in maybe some mountains or something in the background too. Now what I'm doing here too is I'm also duplicating those mountains, because inside of After Effects I want to create basically as we're moving across, I want it to feel like the objects are moving differently, right? So if you ever looked out your window while you're driving, stuff that's really close to the car moves really fast, and stuff that's really far away moves super slow. So we want to create that kind of look also. So doing that will definitely help. Adding some different colors in here will also help us do that. Shrink that down some too. This and that. And you'll see how I'm just using basically that same shape over and over again. I can even use the reflect. There we go. Now we hit it from this side. We just don't want to go into too much, stuff in the way, so we can't really see what's going on. Oops. That, and then I obviously have to create some sort of platform for this thing to be on, so I'll just create some sort of platform here. Control. I lost the hotkey. Control. Yeah, Control F bracket. That's what I was doing. No, that wasn't work. Okay. All right. So now we have things at different levels inside here. Hold it up. I may have to shrink some of this down too, just because of the size of this. I think it's maybe a little bit too big. So I'm going to grab everything. I'm going to go to my transform tool and just shrink it all a bit, and then just kind of place it in here. Okay, because we're not really going up and down with this animation. We're kind of staying locked into like this area here. So I want to make sure that I can still see the stuff, but I don't want it to be like I have to go way up here to see the clouds. And then variation is always good. Also make sure your strokes are off, because I have a lot of strokes on here apparently. There we go. So adding some variation to things like this cloud, just so it's not exactly the same in each one, will add a lot to your animation. All right, that should be good. I think I want to shrink this down like a lot, just make this like super tiny, way in the background. There we go. So now they look like they're really far away from it. And then maybe we'll add a sky in here too, so I'll just zoom back out. I will stop clicking the button and just do this. And then this could be even a gradient. So if I go to my gradient tool and I drop on a, I have to drop it on first. Jazzy. This is the worst thing about Illustrator, is that it moves everything around from Photoshop, so I have to keep figuring out where stuff has been moved to. So this will be a 90 degree. This will be, come on. Just open up. There we go. Just being picky. HSB, so I'm going to go with something like that. Something like that. I think that looks pretty neat. I'll kind of desaturate that a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so I'm just kind of looking at it to see if I don't like anything. I don't like where this rock's end is, so I'm just going to move that. Alright, so again, I can come back and play with it. I can add more stuff. I can tweak things. The gist is that I've got a basic layout at least I can go with. You, of course, want to make sure that yours is set up exactly how you want it, so that you don't have to keep coming back and forth. You can, but you don't have to. So now I can go through and just start labeling stuff. So I'm going to drag this. This is my background. Oops. Let's call this sky. I won't call it background. Okay, turn that off. This is my platform. So new layer. Drop this on. Platform. Turn that off. And then just like I said, I want to keep all these rocks to be separated. A quick way you can do this too is if I grab all of the mountains, I go up to here. I can say release to layers, build. That was the wrong one. Release to layers, sequence. Try it again. Okay, it doesn't want to work now. Whatever. We'll just do it manually. What it should do, it was build, it wasn't sequence, is it should take all those layers and put them into their own layer. But then they're not named, we have to do it anyway, but still, it saves us this step of having to move it. So this will be our, what is that building called? Temple. I can't think of the name of it. Let's call it temple. The Pantheon.
Yeah, the
Pantheon, thank you. Pantheon. Platform. There we go. And then another new layer. And drag this into it. Pantheon. So another new layer, drop us on. Cloud 1. Now that build 1, it was taking everything and separating into a layer. So I don't want to do that because it just makes it harder to select or to isolate. Cloud 2. Now imagine a big project. This is the same thing you have to do. So you have to make sure, obviously, you're staying organized every step of the way. Cave. And I forgot to put an opening for the cave here, so I want to definitely do that. So I'll just go into my pen tool. And shape builder, there you go. Now I can just click that piece because then it'll just let me delete it. Alright, so this will just be darker. There we go. Cool, so it looks like a cave. Alright, so there's my cave. And let me hide that. And then here's my soldiers. That's mountain 1. These ones don't have to be too specific in their naming because you can just move them around at will.
Do we want this closed?
They were being loud next door. You can keep it open now because they're quieter. Thanks. Mountain 2. And then this one will be mountain 3. Alright. So now we should have everything on here. And again, we just go through and kind of reorganize some of our layers just to make sure they're... It's easier to do it here when everything's right there than try to do it inside of After Effects 2. There are my mountains right there, which should be good. Soldiers are there, cave is there. My clouds are in the front of everything, so I'll just put that there. My platform is here, my Pantheon is there, so I'm going to put the Pantheon on top of. Oh, that's that platform, so. There we go. So my Pantheon should be above that. There we go. And then the cave and the soldiers. Okay, everything should be good. All right, so now I can save this as my artwork folder. Angry Bird. Okay. So now the same thing that we did before. Oops. Okay. We go into After Effects. We close this so we can get to our stuff. Wait. There we go. And then we go and find our background. Background. Same thing. Composition, retain layer size, import. And then we can double click it, and then we can see what it looks like. Now we should get a crop version, which we do. This is already set up to be 1920 by 1080. So everything that was to the left of this, or the right of that area, is basically just outside of it. We don't see it. It's still there, though. And you can see the window up here for the background is right there, and I can still move it around. So something like this, I could actually change the animation of this and kind of change what the sky is looking like to change the coloration. So that's kind of neat too. So now what we want to do is start setting this up. We know that everything's in here. We know that it's working. So I want to start setting it up so that the animation is much easier. I'm not going to go through the entire animation, but I just want to show how the process is going to go for this. So I'm going to make everything in here a 3D layer, and then I'm just going to go to the position and start to position and offset each one of these. Okay, so my sky should be the furthest thing back. So I'm going to take that translate Z, which is right here, and push it really far back. Now when I push this super far back, what happens is we start to see the edges. So then I just have to go through the scale and just make it bigger so I don't see the edges. Okay, so something like that. Same thing for each one of my mountains. I'm going to grab their positions and just kind of randomly offset them. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this one back here. I'm going to pull that one back, let's say a bit further than that one. And once we start working in 3D, remember too that the layers don't really matter as far as what they are here. The rest of it is done inside of the 3D area. So one of these is at 600, one's at 2000, one's at 1000. If I need to, I can grab one and just scoot it over because I don't like the position of that. There we go. That's cool. Here's my soldiers. I think they're pretty good right where they're at. They're going to be pretty much lined up with my ground, so I can leave those the way they are. So my soldiers, the cave, the Pantheon needs to be moved back. So let's move that back. And these are together, so I'm just going to push these back together so we can see that. Don't go behind that. Let's get there. And you'll see that one of my mountains is a little bit cutting off. So let's go to, oops, that's my Pantheon platforms cutting off. That's what that is. So I'm just going to scoot that over just a smidge. I could also make this bigger too if I just went to my scale and just scaled it in the X direction. Alright, so that should work. Okay, so now if we look at this, I did my clouds, yes? No, I didn't. Okay, let's push the clouds back too. So let's push these really far back. Really far back. Okay, I want to give them all different movements so that they don't feel like they're all on top of each other. So one's at 600, one's at 2000, one's at 1300. Maybe I need to move them up too just because I've pushed them back so far. And same thing here. Cool. Alright. So now what we're going to be able to do, I'm going to save this project, Angry Bird. And I'm saving it as setup 01. That way I know that I can come back and tweak this after. That's spelled seen right. Alright, cool. So now what I'm going to do is go to my camera. And if I go to, oops, sorry, layer new and add a camera. That should be good for now. Yeah, okay. So just the default setting. Then we're going to go to the camera, and you can see how I can kind of move around the scene. And some of these elements are obviously closer, some of these elements are further away. Now we're never going to do this because obviously that loses the illusion. But what we are going to do is move the camera from side to side. Now one of the things I did forget to turn off on the camera, layer new camera again, is lock the zoom, two node camera, there it is. So I just want a one node camera. Basically I just want one object that I could just move side to side and give us the illusion that this thing is moving correctly. So I do that. Now I can go to the position of the camera, and just by moving it in the X direction, you can see how we are creating this illusion that there is more depth to this than meets the eye. So let's go way far over to the left as far as we can, like that. What? Yes. So you can see as even as I'm zooming in, the objects that are closer, we're getting more of that zooming effect where the objects that are closer are moving faster than the objects that are further away. So I can really zoom in and scoot this over right there, and maybe I'll scoot it down a little bit just because my Angry Bird dude is going to start right about here. A little bit higher. There we go. Okay. So then I could, just to kind of test this out, our animation for this is going to be, let's say 13 seconds. That's a good amount of time for this to work. So I'm just going to make, I'm going to make all my layers that long. And then I'm just going to animate my camera from the start of this here, go down to the end, and then scoot this over. Okay. So now if we look at this, you'll see that my animation, if you look at the background and you look at the elements inside here, you get the feeling that this is actually not full-blown 3D, obviously because of the drawing, but it feels like it has some depth to it. It feels like it's more than just, here's a bunch of pictures, here's my flat guy, and I'm just going to move everything together. Now the Pantheon background, the platform, that needs to change color definitely because it's still like, it's a weird color, so it looks like it's floating. But if you look at that, it looks pretty sweet, especially when you see it a little bit quicker in real time. Now we can duplicate anything. I could add more clouds. I could duplicate all the clouds that I have and add 20 or 30 or 50 clouds if I needed to. I could add effects on top of this. I could add textures on top of this. Let's go to, where's my folder? Let's see, metal. So here are a bunch of metal textures that I have. I've shown you before CG textures, so same kind of thing. You can go to CG textures and get textures. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to paste. It's one thing that a PC can do that a Mac cannot do. Maybe it can, I just don't know it can. It can? Yeah. Not like in mine though. Not like while you're in the browser, right? Like while I double click, you can paste in the Mac? Okay. It can't do it though. Alright, so I can take this, and here's what's cool about that is everything is pretty much static in my scene. There's nothing really moving except for the camera. So if I take this and I did like a multiply on top of this, and then took the opacity down, and then I also made this a 3D object, you'll see that this texture actually like locks to certain objects, like whatever it's in front of. Okay? So it's kind of a neat way to add some grain to those. So these objects that are right here in front is locked to that texture. Obviously the ones in the back aren't because it's moving different. That's really, it needs to be like maybe like 12%. And maybe it needs to be scaled down a lot more. Like that. There you go. So now you create this really cool texture that's on top of your stuff, just to give it a little bit more of a, kind of finished piece. Oops, there we go. And now that I've taken that down, maybe I can set this up to 22. That's cool. Okay, and then again we can look at this and see. So if you ever played like video games now are using a lot of cutscenes, and a lot of the cutscenes that they're using is stuff like this, where instead of going through a full-blown 3D animation of it, they're doing this kind of thing. You're play, what's that game called? Dante's Inferno? Yeah. Right, so all those cutscenes from Dante's Inferno is exactly this kind of thing, where they're using these fake 3D things to do that. Whoops. Off the screen. Obviously I need a bigger texture, smaller details, definitely help out. Now you could also lock this to specific objects. So any single one of these objects that I have here, if I delete that, I could grab things like the soldiers right here, and I could pre-compose them. I could say move everything to the new layer. Soldiers comp is good. Okay, and then I just have to tell it to continuously rasterize, and it'll pop them back to where they're supposed to be. But now I can go into my soldier comp, and I can do whatever I want in here with them, and it'll trickle into that. So if I just wanted one texture onto the soldiers, I could drag that into this, put this on top of the soldiers, and tell this to be, let's say, an add. That's good. And then I can tell it to be a track mat. Oops, the other way. Is that right? No. Yes. I need to go to my channel and say set mat for that. And just tell it that I want to grab the alpha channel from the other one. Alpha channel, stretch to fit. Oh, it's off. Because you're 3D? Probably because you're 3D. Nope. anyway, instead of doing that, I can just set this to multiply and that'll work too. Just get rid of that set mat. That's set to multiply. Alright, it's doing something it shouldn't be doing. Let me just drop that back in. This. And then what I can do with this too is, this is what I want to do. That. Perfect. So I did this as an alpha mat to that, and then I can add this on top of it and then change the transparency of this to bring out that color better. Okay, so the metal's on the bottom, it's an alpha mat, and then the transparency is low on the top. So now when I go to the background, it should have been 3D still. There we go. Now they'll be in 3D, and now they'll still move the way they should be moving. And now they actually have some texture on them, so we can see it. Yeah, this way didn't work out as good as I thought it was going to. Let me drop that in again. This, that. I wanted just to cut it out, and that should have worked. This set mat should have worked. Set mat. To that. There it is. Oh, that's what I did is I moved it. That's why it didn't work before, because I actually moved my texture. So now that it's on top of it, now I can go in here and set that to multiply. It still moved a little bit, that's why we're getting this like glowy. So I just need to nudge it back into place. Perfect. Now I go back to here. Now I make sure that this soldiers is a 3D layer. Make sure that this is a 3D layer. There we go. And now everything's back to where it should be. If I need to for any one of these pieces, I can still scale it up. I can still scale it down. I can reposition anything. Even my clouds I could animate also. So these clouds that are here, I can just set a position keyframe at the beginning, go up a bit, and then set another position keyframe maybe further down this way. And what that does is just give us, again, a little bit more realism to it because we have more stuff moving. If we had a flag in the scene, then we could add a flag to the scene or anything like that. Okay? And create some sort of way to animate that flag. I could have the sun, you know, there's stuff I can create inside of After Effects too. If I made an ellipse and just put this here. And every hotkey that works in Photoshop and Illustrator is completely different inside of After Effects. So you always have to remember what they are. So for something like this, I can just add a gradient, a radial gradient, pull this out like that, and then go to my colors here. And this transparency is way down, that's why it's looking like that. So I'm going to crank that up. Go here, go there. Alright, so we'll just save that for now. I can pick better colors later. Okay, so because this is just 3D layers now, I can add other stuff into the scene and do whatever I want with it. Make sure it is a 3D layer. There we go. And then shrink it down. And then reposition it behind everything. Oops, too far back. It went behind the background. Should pop out anytime. There it is. There we go. Okay, so you can still create stuff inside here. You can still add textures to it, details, whatever, on top of the stuff that we've done inside of After Effects. Okay, so the next lecture will be how to then take this guy and rig him so that we can do different things. Now, if you wanted to add other controls to him, like let's say you wanted him to blink, or you wanted for any specific thing, you wanted something different, oops, besides just being able to move stuff inside. What do we keep doing? Besides just kind of moving stuff like his pupil around, like let's say you actually wanted to make him smile, or you wanted his eyes to be worried as opposed to being angry, every single one of those things would have to be different layers inside of Illustrator. Okay, so for some characters, when we watch that bowling thing, the Big Lebowski, so every single one of those facial poses was basically a separate layer. Every mouth was a separate mouth layer, and all they're doing is switching between all these different mouth layers in order to capture exactly what they need to do. So a lot of times you'll see these things called phenomes. After effects. And so for every single one of your character's poses, you're essentially needing to create a different pose for that character inside of After Effects. So a brand new layer with maybe just the mouth, or maybe just the eyes, or maybe just anything, okay? So you're going to be animating something extra on there, so that's why we separated the pupils and the eyebrows so we can animate those separately. I animated his helmet separately so that as he bounces, his helmet isn't squishing, he squishes, and maybe his helmet's going to start bouncing like on top of him or something. I'll do something with that, okay? So just keep that stuff in mind as you're working on your stuff. Here's another one that's just dealing with mouth shapes. So every single one of these shapes is a separate layer inside of After Effects that you could then go through and animate each one of those. Basically, you're just jumping from one to the other to the other, okay? And then you can create basically little lip sync type things. Okay. All right. So